Hi, everybody. Welcome to this Facebook Live. I'm Pat Ogden. I'm the founder of Sensorimotor Psychotherapy. And I want to share today our foundational principles of sensorimotor psychotherapy that have really been kind of my teachers, not only professionally, but also personally since the 70s. And I hope that reflecting on these principles will help us all kind of navigate the holidays in the times of all this unrest politically and with the coronavirus. So we all have kind of a set of assumptions or beliefs that either consciously or unconsciously kind of influence our actions and our lives. And in sensorimotor psychotherapy, uh, a set of philosophical, spiritual principles guide our clinical practice, many of which Ron Kurtz introduced me to in the 1970s. And these principles draw from Eastern and indigenous perspectives. So I want to acknowledge that. Uh, um, They're the most important part of sensorimotor psychotherapy, but we can also use them as kind of a compass to help us live rewarding and enriching lives. They have great meaning for me personally as well as professionally. And for me, they inspire kind of a higher state of awareness and consciousness. Um, they're a way of kind of supporting the internal conditions that optimize well-being. Yeah. So I want to share them with you, not so much from a clinical standpoint, but from a personal standpoint and how they might support you through these times. So there's 6 of them, and we'll start with organicity. It's a term borrowed from Gregory Bateson. And it basically means that every living system, including us human beings, each one has its own intelligence, its own kind of mysterious wisdom inside. Uh, Um, One of the ways that I think of it is in terms of our bodies. Like if we break our bones, if we break a bone, we can go to the hospital and the doctor can provide the support, like setting the bone that catalyzes healing from within. But the intelligence to heal is inside of us. The doctor just creates those conditions so that intelligence hopefully can emerge. Yeah. So if we have the faith that we have this intelligence inside, it kind of shifts our attitudes towards ourselves. It's kind of a non-pathologizing attitude. We go from something's wrong to there's some wisdom there, even if I don't fully understand it. Um, and it's not meant to deny or minimize even that we have personal problems, we have struggles, we have difficulties that need our attention. But we can kind of attune to the underlying intent of even our difficulties to fuel our own growth or to help us cope. Um, I was talking with a young man in my life in his late 20s, and he struggles with drinking, and we were talking about, well, drinking is kind of like a survival resource for you. You go to it to help yourself regulate somehow when you're feeling really bad or dysregulated. And he's like, oh yeah, it is. It helps me cope. And in that moment, it was reframed from a liability to somehow reestablishing the trust that there was some intelligence behind that, which actually has made it easier for him to cut back quite a bit, I think. So, as living systems, we're constantly changing and evolving. It's just, we can't help it. It's a function of being alive. So I think if we can attune to the next step in our evolution and in our process, um, it's a different way of relating to ourselves than trying to push ourselves to accomplish something. Um, my own therapist used to talk about forcing currents, like currents of energy that try to force ourselves or force others to be a certain way. And a forcing current, which we all use, but it's kind of goes against organicity. Rather than push um, and use those forcing currents, maybe we can recognize the next steps we're already engaged in. We can validate and appreciate our own growth and evolution and our own struggles um, as having inherent wisdom, even if we can't quite see it. Um, so if we turn our attention to this faith in our own organicity, even when we don't understand it, we can be more gentle and accepting of ourselves. We can believe in ourselves more. And, who doesn't need that? When I think about my life, some of the most important, meaningful relationships have been from people who believed in me. Yeah, so what greater gift could we give ourselves this holiday season than to believe in ourselves, than to trust this organicity? And if we have faith in that organicity, then nonviolence, which is another principle, is more natural. There's no need to push or force. And keep in mind that, force will lead to resistance. If you push something, there's going to be a pushback. It's just kind of a law of nature, right? Um, so one of the ways that I personally try to cultivate nonviolence and organicity is to um, kind of be aware of the judgment or bias that I have towards parts of myself or towards other people or parts of them. And it can come out in critical attitudes, judgmental attitudes towards ourselves or towards others, and kind of subtle dismissal of our own emotions, our thoughts, our desires, our appearance, right? Uh, we might even judge or dismiss our own or other people's social locations, like sexual orientation or gender expression, race, ability, ethnicity, and so forth. And all that is really expression of a kind of violence. So being aware of those, we can try to catch those self-deprecating or other deprecating messages. Um, um, and when instead of the self-judgment, I start to think of, okay, um, what kind of conditions will support nonviolence and a trust in organicity? If you think about growing a plant, once the soil's prepared and the sun and the water are provided, the plant will kind of grow on its own. So when I think about the conditions that will support, my own unfolding or another person's unfolding, I can sort of have an attitude of accepting these judgmental parts for what they are. maybe something I learned through society or through my own attachment relationships, the kind of self-ridicule and all, and I can befriend them instead of kind of identify with the judgment and the criticism. I hope that makes sense. Um, and Albert Schweitzer, I've always kind of admired him. And one of the things he talked about was having a reverence for life, including your own life and your own process. And that phrase comes to mind in terms of nonviolence, a reverence for life and for yourself makes it easier to embody a sense of nonviolence with ourselves and our loved ones. Yeah. A third principle, and all these principles kind of relate together: organicity, nonviolence, unity is another principle. And unity simply has to do with the interconnection among everything, right? It's the realization and even the kind of felt experience that we're part of a whole and that we're an important part of the whole. The whole wouldn't be the same without us, whether it's our family, our neighborhood, our culture, our nation, our world. Um, um, I remember doing a conference once with Deepak Chopra and Minos Kafatos on consciousness. And they had written a book called You Are the Universe, which really has to do with unity. They talked about how all of us are embedded co-creators. The universe isn't out there. It's not separate from us. We're an integral part of it. But somehow we often feel isolated, like we don't belong, we're not a part of things. But if we can turn into this truth, really, that we are all interconnected, uh, we can honor that sense of belonging. Thich Nhat Hanh, he wrote, he said, "You will see clearly that there's a cloud floating in this sheet of paper. Without a cloud, there can be no rain. Without rain, the trees cannot grow. Without trees, we cannot make paper." And I just like that because to me, it speaks to, we can see the whole in any part. And if we can feel our uniqueness as a really valuable part of the whole, it can promote our well-being. And the isolation can disappear. Um, I do want to say, though, because when I first learned about unity with Ron in the 70s, uh, I was just enthralled with this idea that we're all connected. We're all the same in some way. And what I've learned, though, is that unity really recognizes and celebrates difference as well. Um, so that's a part of unity and a part of my own reflection. Can I celebrate my own and other people's differences and still really feel connected and part of the whole? I think we're challenged in our society to do that with the political climate the way that it is, at least in the United States. How can we acknowledge and sense that everyone is a part of the same whole? Yeah. Um, One of the other ways I think of unity is that although unity is a given, it becomes a lived reality when parts communicate. You ever have you meet somebody and you don't know them, you feel like they're a stranger and you don't really sense that connection, but then you start to communicate and you're like, wow, you really feel the connection between you. So we can capitalize and augment the felt sense of unity through communication. Um, Communication with parts of ourselves. Can we uh, recognize the parts of ourselves that we have pushed away? Especially, I think this holiday season, it's important because the holidays fraught with so many memories, maybe fabulous ones of excitement and joy at Christmas, but also maybe really disappointing ones of Christmas or Hanukkah or other holidays. So, can we embrace the parts of ourselves um, that we want to push away because maybe they don't feel good somehow? Can we really communicate with those parts and enfold them in our being? And can we also extend to communicate with others? Um, so that's one of the ways this principle helps me, is that I try to pay attention to communication, to kind of deep listening to myself and to others, because that increases my ability to sense the unity. Yeah. So another principle is called mind, body, spirit holism, um, and this is one that speaks to that these are three very vital and important aspects of each of us, right? Um, and kind of a holistic approach to our own well-being considers all three, mind, body, and spirit, however we relate to them. Um, I think of mind as our thoughts, our perceptions, our imagination, our memories, even our emotions, and so forth. Yeah. And the body as our physiology, our autonomic nervous system, our gestures, expressions, postures, and the little micro movements. And of course, all the rest, the amazing intelligence within our own physicality. Um, and the spirit, to me, refers to aspects of ourselves that's connected to something non-material, something in a way larger than our own existence. It's often associated with a sense of reverence. See, we see the interconnection of all the principles, right? A sense of reverence, of awe, of a greater encompassing purpose. Yeah. And for many of us, spirit includes an experience of that which is sacred. Um, so in terms of mind, body, spirit, for me, I think about, well, how can I really honor all three? Because the way that we're often socialized can teach us to ignore parts of ourselves. Like it can teach us to ignore our bodies. Like, when even sitting in school, sitting in those desks, you remember that when you're like 6, 7 years old, how hard that was to sit still. It really denied the impulses and the energy of our bodies. Yeah? Our socialization could teach us that there's only one way to be spiritual, um, which might make it harder to find our own spiritual connection. Yeah? We might learn that being rational is the most important. Um, use your rational mind. Don't get too emotional. Um, so we can take a look at how are we conditioned to respond to these aspects of our being. Um, how can we honor all aspects of our being, our emotions, our mind, our body, spirituality? Um, And I think about this often. I mean, even as a body person, I can fail to exercise or, fail to really honor when I'm tired. Uh, and so forth. I might not take the time every day to deepen my spiritual connection or to excite my mind. And these are also important. So I think even more so in times of stress, whether it's positive stress or negative stress. Yeah. So we can think about what puts us in touch with our spiritual nature, for example. Is it, for me, it's poetry and art, music, nature, going for a walk every day in the mountains, which also feeds my physicality, right? How can we listen to our bodies and our body's needs? Um, uh, what stimulates our minds? What do we enjoy learning or imagining? How can we take care of our emotional self? Yeah? And how can we honor our emotions rather than try to push them away? So, for this principle for me, it's really each day, how can I attend to all these aspects of my being in the busyness of life, right? All right, another principle, our newest one, I call relational alchemy. Um, I love this new edition because it speaks to kind of the emergent, mysterious forces that brings people together and guides our interactions with others. And relational alchemy has two facets to it, um, which which has really helped me in my relationships, honestly. One is kind of this wonder of connection that occurs just naturally without effort through kind of the synergy of the relational dance. You know, when you're really in tune with someone, we will experience like being seen or understood or belonging or connected or even love, and gratitude and we know those alchemical moments in relationship, yeah. Uh, um, but also, what's important is that those same relational forces that lead to those expansive experiences also kind of underpin the conflict and struggles that we have in relationships where we feel misunderstood or criticized or disregarded or abandoned and all that, all the negative things we don't want to feel. But they're inherent in relationship because none of us are perfect. Wherever we are, we carry our history with us, and those histories can really interlock in conflict. Yeah, but working through them can also relationally can also lead to a greater connection. Um, so one of the ways that I think about this, see if this is helpful for you, is considering the alchemy that is forged when um, each part of each person comes forward, kind of an interaction with the counterpart in the other. So if one person is too needy, I might pull away, or I might overextend to take care of them, right? Or vice versa. If someone's intrusive, I might withdraw, or I might just become compliant. Um, and these are the relational dances, how we respond to parts of each other that come forward. If I'm blaming, the other person may feel defensiveness or may feel shame. If I'm critical, another person may feel inadequate, and vice versa. So if I trust relational alchemy um, as providing opportunities through the conflict or the struggles for amazing personal growth and relationship. If I trust that, I can become curious about the strife in relationships. I can become curious rather than judgmental. Um, I'm more open if I consider a conflict in terms of relational alchemy to be willing to look at myself. So, and then, this is important when we're under stress of any kind, really. So in this way, I can relate to conflict of a manifestation of relational alchemy, and be more open to seeing my part and working through it and healing then, internally. Yeah, but I also think that we can kind of have an intention to bring forward the positive, the good feelings of relational alchemy. Ron Kurtz, who is my best friend, uh, most influential mentor, um, he talked about, as a therapist, that he always liked to look for something to love in his clients instead of for deficits or problems. And I apply that personally. When I look for something to love or appreciate in the person that I'm with, it kind of primes the pump for relational alchemy and for connection. So it's something I try to practice. And, I especially notice it with the kids in my life, um, uh, how valuable it is when I focus on their positive qualities and find things to appreciate. And then those things become bigger. So maybe you'll find that useful here during the holidays in your interactions as well. So the last principle, I thought about dividing this into two, but the really so interrelated that I kept them kind of connected. Presence and mindfulness. And presence has to do with kind of a unified consciousness. That felt sense when you're just one with the moment and you're just participating in the state of being. You're not thinking. I think it's almost like being what some people call in the zone, where it's just full participation. It has much more to do with being rather than doing. Mindfulness, on the other hand, is a dual consciousness, because there's always the observer and that which is observed. So it's different from that kind of unified presence. When we're present, it feels like we're one with what is in our immediate sphere. And I know, to me, it feels like I can be with the newness. It's not so much governed by habits formed from my history. I know there's something that Rebecca Solnit, who's a writer and an activist, said. She said, to be fully present is to be capable of being in uncertainty and mystery. And that's where the magic, I think, can really happen, when we're not superimposing our expectations from our past on the present moment. But there's research that shows half of our waking hours we're not present. And I think this is really where mindfulness comes in a really valuable way for me, because mindfulness helps train our minds to focus and to wander less. And it can kind of be a bridge from that sense of autopilot. You're not really present, you're just doing it. It can be a bridge from that autopilot to being present. And with mindfulness, we can start to notice our patterns. We already talked about a little bit in this little talk, like notice when we're being judgmental. We might notice when our bodies are tightening up. Notice what keeps us in the past, that keeps us imposing the past on the present. Like for me, my body's a huge cue. Like if I can feel myself pulling back or tightening up, and I'm like, okay, I'm having a reaction that is telling me something about my state of presence. Yeah. At the same time with our, and I think this is kind of the challenge. If we're too mindful, our attention is constantly divided because mindfulness is a divided attention where there's the observer, part of us is observing ourselves, watching our reactions. And if we're too divided, we run the risk of really hindering our participation and our engagement in the dance of life. Yeah. So to me, it's just a very interesting exploration, this between presence and mindfulness, and the difference between presence and autopilot. Yeah. And when I'm on an autopilot, I then try to use mindfulness as a bridge to bring me present again. And I think this can be especially helpful during these stressful times, to notice our thoughts, to be aware of our expectations and judgments, our body reactions that tell us we're not present, and befriend ourselves in keeping with all the principles and kind of, come back to the moment. Yeah. Um, I think the holidays especially are a time where we can tend to impose the past on the present instead of relishing the present and the newness of the present that won't be the same as the past. Yeah. So, each one of us, we need to like kind of exist in a context that'll support our own um, emergence, right? Our own growth. Um, and for me, these principles offer a kind of roadmap for thriving, really, in relationship to ourselves and to others and to the world. On the one hand, they're really lofty and idealistic. We'll never embody them fully. I mean, I'm constantly catching myself. Oh, I'm not trusting my process. I'm being judgmental. I don't, I'm not tuned in to the sense of connection and so forth. So they are really lofty ideals, but at the same time, they're very practical, at least for me. And it's kind of an emergent process of increasing alignment with them. Yeah, not as a goal or as an endpoint, but to kind of enjoy that process. Um, and I really feel that in their purest form, really, they're kind of a map for love. They really create atmosphere or a context of love for ourselves, for others, for the world. So I hope that reflecting kind of on these principles in a personal way can support you as they have me over most of my adult life, ever since I met Ron Kurtz, 73, I think. Um, So they've been a great gift and a great teacher for me, and I hope they can be for you as well if you resonate with them. Okay, so happy holidays to everybody. Take good care of yourselves and your loved ones. Stay safe and healthy. Okay, bye.